Hi, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day so far. My name is Amanda from Melissa, and I am today's moderator for the Dynamics CRM webinar. I am joined by our guest presenter, Salim Adamon, XRM Vision's Business Solutions Director, as well as Melissa's sales engineer, Chris Muller. Salim will take you through how SharpXRM's address validation for Dynamics 365 uses Melissa APIs to prevent address errors and associated costs. And Chris will elaborate further on those Melissa APIs. But before we get into the presentation, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. As we are all recording this webinar from our homes, please bear with us if there are any unexpected audio interruptions. We will do our best to keep the webinar continuing smoothly. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box to the right of the presentation screen at any point during the presentation, and we will save them for the Q&A following the presentation. Should we run out of time and not be able to address all of your inquiries, we will connect with you afterwards, and contact information will also be posted at the end of the presentation for your reference. A replay of the webinar will be available and sent to you 24 hours following the end of today's recording. If you happen to experience any technical issues, such as losing audio, you can click the top red button labeled Reconnect to be reconnected. If the problem persists, we have found that closing out the webinar page and rejoining using the same link that was provided to you has worked. Should we experience any technical issues on our end, we will quickly restart the session and all be placed into a new room. You don't have to do anything except hang tight. That's it for our housekeeping items. So now I'll hand it over to Salim.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making the time. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can improve your Dynamics 365 CRM data quality with Melissa and SharpXRM. My name is Salim Adamon. I'm the product owner here at SharpXRM, and I'm joined by Chris Muller, sales engineer at Melissa, who's going to be with me here showing you some of the exciting stuff around Dynamics and Melissa. I want to go over the agenda here as we get started. We'll start by talking about Microsoft Dynamics 365, the CRM platform, and what the status is around customer data quality. So that's going to be our first stop. Second, we'll talk about what is address validation for Dynamics 365, but what is the tool that we're presenting and talking about today. We'll talk about what are the Melissa APIs that are available and their benefits. And of course, we'll have to see it in action. So we'll go into the application. We'll show you guys a demo so you can see what the product looks like and how it integrates with your Dynamics 365 platform. Not mentioned explicitly here, but of course, we have a section in the end for questions. But all along as we go through the content, feel free to ask your questions in the chat there. And if we can address the questions as we go, we'll stop. If not, we'll wait until the end and we'll address them there. All right, so let's get started here. Dynamics 365 is Microsoft's customer engagement platform. So commonly, or I want to say historically called Dynamics CRM. And it allows to do things such as sales, customer service, and field service. And so there's a certain level of engagement with customers. Some of the business scenarios that we think are pertinent to mention here, in a lot of cases, when you do sales or customer service or field service, there's a need of sending letters to people or sending packages to places or people. There's also a need to have people on the road. So whether they're sales agents going from prospect to customers, visiting people, whether it's also mobile field service agents that go on the field to do repairs, to do preventive maintenance and things of that nature. There is that need to have people on the road or packages or letters on the road. And so there is an important need around having good address information. And what we realize with experience and with interacting with various customers over time is that when you have bad address and contact data, it costs you. It can cost you money in terms of sending people to the wrong places, sending packages that are returned and having to send them again. It can cost you customers that are unsatisfied because you don't show up at the right place, because you don't show up on time, etc. And also you're losing potential insights, right? Because you don't have some of the information around where you do business, how you do business in one region and another, etc. So these are all things that are really important to capture. So that's why we always think that bad data in terms of address is not a good thing for any business that has to do with having people on the road or packages on the road and things of that nature. Now, in terms of Dynamics 365, we're trying to see what the platform has to offer in terms of making sure the address information is correct in your system. And so in the Dynamics 365 field service application, there is a basic offering of address standardization and geocoding that uses Bing Map in the background. And so that allows to come back with an address that is standardized, written properly, and the geo coordinates, but it lacks a lot of the features. For example, it doesn't tell you that the address is real. It just gives you the proper format and a geolocation. It doesn't give you a unit number. It doesn't tell you if you can actually deliver a package there. There's information around zip +4, and there's also much more information around the addresses that are available that is not returned by a service like Bing Maps, right? So, and this comes out of the box with field service in Dynamics 365. That's all you get. If you go with Dynamics 365 for sales or for customer service, there is actually nothing in the system natively to allow you to verify your address information, right? So this is really something that is not there. So if you want to have that in place, you have to do something. And this is where Melissa is actually coming in handy, because there's a lot of functionalities around making sure the data, the address data is proper, that we bring to Dynamics 365 with our tool. So what is address validation for Dynamics 365? It's Melissa Clean Suite. So it's an add-on for Dynamics 365. So you install it on top of an organization or a Dynamics instance that exists. And it brings Melissa address verification, correction, standardization to Dynamics 365. So it's a solution that you install. It's lightweight, very simple to install, very flexible in terms of how you can configure it to meet your needs. Can be used on various type of objects or entity for those that are more Dynamics 365 experts. And you can use any field. So whether it's native fields or custom fields, you can use them as your address fields. And you have the ability to use the tool on your web client form. So as you're looking at a contact or an account screen, you can type in your information and you can do verification from there. Or you can also do that on the server side, so without any user interaction. So this is really the basic of the functionality there. And then what we want to talk about is what are some of the Melissa APIs that are available in SharpXRM in order to do all of these address verification and cleanup. And Chris is going to walk us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Salim. So I'll go ahead and walk us through the 3 Melissa APIs that we have available in the SharpXRM plugin for Dynamics. The first service that we have available is our Personator service. And this service is able to validate addresses within the US and Canada and return geocoordinates of up to the rooftop level for those addresses. We do have a couple future developments that we're going to be implementing for the service. The first is going to be functionality to be able to verify the name, phone, and email input fields along with the address information that you send over to Personator. And the second development is going to be functionality that will be able to help append on any missing information to the response from Personator that may not have been included in the initial request to it. The second service that we have is our global address verification service. And this service is able to validate addresses in over 200 countries and territories around the world and return geocoordinates up to the rooftop level for those addresses. And then the final plugin, or the final service that we have in the plugin, is our Global Express Entry service. This is our point of entry address auto completion, and kind of how it works and how Salim will show you in the demonstration is you'll give the service a partial address and it will return a list of fully validated and deliverable addresses that are related to kind of what you typed in. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Salim to take us through the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so now it's time for the more fun stuff. We don't want to kill anyone with PowerPoint. So we're going to go into the demonstration. And what you'll see first is where do you find the solution and how do you install it? So we'll go over that briefly. And then we'll go into how do you configure your Melissa APIs in Dynamics? How do you map your fields and your objects so that the addresses get validated and stored in the right place? And then finally, how do you configure your forms and workflows in order for all the magic of address verification to be added onto your Dynamics instance and used by your end users. So we'll go over that. I will switch the share and I will now be sharing my screen. All right, perfect. So first thing, where do you get the plugin if you want to install it and try it? If you go onto our website, which is sharpxrm.com, you will get, of course, additional information about the product. If you're interested in knowing more how it works, some of the functionalities, you'll find it there. We also have a section with frequently asked questions that is available, I believe, somewhere down here. So you have all of that. And then if you are interested in downloading the plugin and install it on your environment, we are in the process of getting the application onto the Microsoft App Source. In the meantime, you have to download the solution from here. There are two solutions available. So there's one for the latest version of Dynamics 365 in the cloud. And there is one here for the legacy versions of Dynamics 365 or CRM on premises or in the cloud. So if you are on one of these older versions, you do have solutions that are available here for you. They don't get updated as much as the more recent ones, but they do get updated. So you would download the plugin from here. So this will give you the Dynamics 365 zip solution file. So common for those who are more familiar with Dynamics 365. And over here, we have the actual user guide. So it's a very complete guide. I'm not planning to go over it completely here as it's a long document, but it basically goes over all of the steps, right? So where do you get the solution? How do you activate your license? If you want a trial, what are the steps to get the trial going? Self-service without needing to talk to us. And then it goes more into how do you configure the application? How do you configure your APIs, your entities or objects, as I was mentioning earlier, and all that kind of jazz. So I'm not going to go over the different sections here, but I just want to point out that it's there. So in case you need to get on and get started by yourself here, you have basically everything that you need if you were to do that. So in our case, we've already downloaded the solution and we've installed it in an environment that we own. And so I'm going to go into that environment, and then what I want to do is I want to show how the Melissa APIs are configured for them to become available for us to use in the application for address verification. Once you do the installation, you install the solution on your environment, it becomes available here as an application. So you see that here we have an application that's called address validation. Well, that's the plugin that we installed. So now it becomes available. And when you click on it, it gives you this sitemap, really simple. It's got just 3 data points. So the licenses, which is the first step that you have to go through in order to make sure you can use the product. So you have to activate a license, whether it's a trial or a license that you would actually have purchased. And after that, the second step is to set up your API configuration. Setting up an API configuration means what? It means you need to tell the system, I have a Melissa Express entry service key that I want to use in Dynamics. And so you need to tell the system that it is a license key for Express entry, and that so you plug it into the system, and then you go configure your forms and your workflows to use that key. How does that work? If you hit the new button here, it comes up with a form that shows you the different APIs that are available here. So if you go Express entry or you go global impersonator, you have those that are available here. And once you select those, you put a value in there. Value goes here. So this would be the license for the service that you would have purchased from Melissa Data, and then you select the default country if you want one, right? So if in your organization, for example, if most of the addresses you're trying to validate are going to be U.S. addresses, then you would select your United States as your default country. And if you're more of an international company, then you wouldn't select anything here, and you would let the users select for themselves. So that would be the first step here. And you can see in our case, we already have one defined for each. So we have an Express entry key, we have a global key, and we have a impersonator key. We're going to be demoing the Express entry and the global address verification. I'll start with Express entry. And before I go into the configuration and how things are connected, I want to go over an account and show you how the control for Express entry works. So as Chris was mentioning, Express entry is more of a autocomplete type of feature, right? So I have a blank field and I start typing, and it's going to come back with possible values for what I'm looking for, and I'm going to get to select the value that I want. A lot like what you do when you use Google Maps and things of that nature, except the information that you get in return is much more complete in this case. So if I were to look, for example, for an address in New York, I'm looking for 799 Greenwich Street. And so here what you see is I have that address that came back. So this is actually the one that I'm looking for here. And I can select it with the zip +4. I can select just without anything here. And if I select this here, the value without the zip +4, what it's going to do is it's going to say, well, I know that in that address, the zip is actually, there's 4 more digits that are available. So it means there are probably apartments in there that I'm going to make available for users to pick so that they have a complete address, right? And so if I go here and I select an apartment, you can see that the zip +4 it came in, and also the unit number was updated. So now this is Microsoft PCF control. So it's a new type of control that we've created to make the experience really smooth. And so this is a control that we dropped in there, and you can see that the actual fields get updated. So whether you display those on the form or not, they will get updated at the database level. And now we have an address that's complete because we have the full address if we want it. We have the street name, the city, and we also have the Latin long information, right? So everything came in there. And if we scroll down slightly here, you see that the native map that comes with the application gets updated automatically. And if anybody needs a proof, this is actually New York. So it is somewhere over there. There it is. So this is for express entry, right? And so what I want to do now is I want to show how we got there. So how did we configure that? How did we tell the system that these fields in our control means those fields on the actual account? And how does that work? By going into the solution. For those that are not familiar with this is the Dynamics 365 configuration screen. And so here we have the express entry form. That's the one that we were looking at on the other side. And if I click on there, it'll take me to the screen that's used to personalize or customize the account form that we just saw. And so on here, what you will have is, as I double click on there, you can recognize the address field. So these are the ones that we were seeing on the form. And this over here is the control that renders as what you saw there with the list of the fields that we had. And if I double click on it, it's going to show me all of the parameters that are available. And so this is where we define in the controls. We have the Melissa data express entry autocomplete. And here, what you see is all of the properties that we've put in. So the control comes with those properties that you have to fill. And so one of them is the API configuration, right? So you just saw me, the very first thing that I did is I show you some of the configurations that we had for the APIs. And the express entry is the one that we're using here. So we have to give that as an input parameter to the control so it knows what license key it's supposed to use and which service it's supposed to hit. And then there's all the other fields. So the street line 1, the unit number, etc. And you can use native out of the box field as well as custom fields. As you can see here for the full address, it's a custom field. And for the other fields, they are native fields, right? So you have the ability to mix and match depending on how you use your system, how you manage your addresses and entities. But the control basically takes all these inputs. It renders the what you saw earlier with the autocomplete box, and then all the values, when they get selected, they get pushed into all of these fields value that are selected over here. Okay. So that was express entry. Now I want to go into global, right? And so Chris mentioned earlier, global is more of a, it works differently in the sense that it provides address verification for, I think, more than 200 countries. But in one way that it's significantly different from express entry is that it's not an autocomplete type of system. You have to fill in information and then you have to send it to the service, and it's going to return with the details or with some updates, some things that have been modified based on the verifications that were made. So what we're going to do here, as you see, I changed my form. I went to another form that's called global, and you see here that I don't have the same control as I had earlier because I don't need an autocomplete. The control in that case is just a button that we dropped here, and I'll talk about how it's configured in a minute. And how that's different is we have to give it some information, and then we have to send that information over to the service, and then it's gonna go in and do verification and get back to us. Right. So I'll do this. I'll purposely make some mistakes. And then what I'll do is I'll simply, I'll save this here, and I will, my internet, my browser is giving me some issues. Okay, we're back. All right, so I click the validate button, and so the expectation is it should take all these fields as input, and it should go and talk to the global web service, and it should return values that are corrected. So I purposely missed the zip code here, so I expect that it's going to be updated to the proper value. So it does that. It brings me a pop-up, which is going to present me with two things: my input original values, and then the output that it got. And then it's for me to make some additional changes or to just accept the changes as they come back. So I'll give it a second, some response. So it's telling me that the Melissa API returns some errors, which are not errors, actually updates that were made based on the input data and what was verified. And so if I click on continue here, you'll see that I have some of the information that came back with the proper formatting. I have the zip code that came back with the proper value. And then in this particular case, you see that I don't have a lat and long. And this is because my API is not enabled for lat and long. But if it were, then I would get that information back here. And we leave that read-only because we don't want people to override the lat and long. And then we leave all the other fields there open in case when the address is verified, maybe there's some additional changes or some subtle things that you need to update. So you would make the updates here, and you would just go ahead and confirm that, and the information would be saved back over to the account back here. So in that case, I didn't click back on the confirm, so the information is not back, but typically that's the way it would have worked. Now, how was the system able to tell just by me clicking on here that it should read in those fields? And also, how is it supposed to know where to save the information once I hit the confirm button? And so this is happening here. If I go back to the application that we installed, we showed the API configurations, but we also want to show the address field configurations, right? And so this one is where you define for a specific object, in that case, an account. You are going to define for an API that you use global, you're going to define the fields that are used for input and for output. And so this is what's going to be used by the button that you just saw me click there. So you have the ability to say that you want to have your input field separate than your output field. So that way you want to let people type in information, and then you want to run a validation separately to have always the source and the destination. Or you can have both in the same field. So in that case, I have used the same fields for input and output. Yes, so that means I am going to read off of all the fields that are configured here. And once I validate them, I am going to save back into those fields. So this will be, in effect, an override. And if I were to say no, I have a separate set of fields that appear here. So that way, what it means is when I do an address verification, I will read from the fields that are here, and I will save in the fields in the destination section over there. All right. So I'll go back to yes. You can see also that in terms of the data, these are fields that are in the address entity. So back to the idea of being able to use any objects that's in the Dynamics 365 platform that has address fields, you could do that, right? So it doesn't have to be account or contact. It could be a custom object that you would put it there, so long as it has these fields that are required to put the information back once the address is verified and validated. So that's kind of what I wanted to show here. And if you look at that form here, that button basically is connected to the address verification field configuration that I just showed. So that's really how those two are connected. Now, the last piece that I want to show is how do you do address verification with a workflow on the server side without any human interaction, right? So let's say you do an update in an Excel spreadsheet that gets in here and you don't have anybody looking at the screen to be able to click on the button to validate. Is there anything that you can run so that the address gets validated still? And the answer is yes. If you go in Dynamics, for those that are familiar in the flows area, you can run a flow or a workflow. And in that case, we've configured one that's called validate account address. And if you click on that, the expectation is that this will use the field configuration record that I showed a minute ago, and it will run the validation on the server side without any interactions from us here, right? So what we've done, we've configured it so that it doesn't update any of the fields here, but what it does is it creates for us an additional line here. And you see it's 2:32 p.m. So this was just created right now. So that line was created by the workflow. And this is one way to show how the results coming from the workflow can be exploited, can be used. So it returns information such as the city, the Latin long, which are 0, and the details also of the changes that were made, right? So postal code change, sub-admin area changed, etc. So this is information that came back from the service without me looking at the screen. So it happened when I clicked on the button with the workflow there. So I also want to spend a minute to show how the workflow is configured so that you understand where all of this came from, and what I could have done with it. Right? So if I go back to my Dynamics configuration area and I go to processes, I have the validate account address here, which is a workflow. And if I open it up, what you'll see is what we do with the SharpXRM plugin is we provide a custom step here, which is address verification. So you see SharpXRM verify address. If I click on there, what you'll see is that step that we've added takes as an input parameter the name of the configuration that you want to use. So I'm running a workflow against the account. I'm passing as a parameter the configuration that I've created that's related to the account. So that knows an account that knows the field input and output of the account. And so with that as an input, the workflow runs and it's able to go and verify the address based on the information that I provided. And what's interesting is that I'll actually deactivate that so you can see how it works. It makes all of the values that are returned by the Melissa APIs, it makes those values available inside the workflow for usage in any way that we want. So if I go here, you will see that I have the full address, and the field in yellow here is actually a return from the address verification. And how do we do that? If I go towards the end, in the workflow configurator, I have the verify address, which is the step that I just ran before. And it gives me all of these fields that are returned by the API. So the city, the county, country, the full address, lat long. We also have a field here which indicates if we found any results or not, because we don't want people to override their data if no results was found, right? So we provide that as well. And yeah, and the verification details. So earlier you saw we had information about the sub-admin area that was updated and also the zip code that was updated. So this information is available in that verification details field. That's kind of how it works. In our case, what we did, we created a note here, but you also have the ability to say within that workflow, I want to update the fields on the account, right? Because that workflow is set up to work against the accounts. As you can see here, the entity is account. And so in that workflow, we also have the ability to say, let's simply update the account fields instead. So if you were to come in here, you would select, for example, if I go here, you would select in the street address 1. I would say, well, instead of not having anything, I'll go back to my verify address step and I will put the street address on here. I'll say add. And now the workflow would save the street address directly into that field on the account instead of creating just a note that I did earlier. Save and close, and I would save that and activate it, and it would basically close the loop on that. So I hope that makes sense. So this is a different mechanism, of course, than using the screen and clicking the button and having that interaction with the address verification, understanding the fields, etc. It happens automatically on the server. All right. So I think at the demo level, that's all I had there.
Perfect. Thanks, Salim. We'll go ahead and hop back into the presentation bit. Did you have any other final closing points you want to talk about before we move into the Q&A?
No, quickly recap what we just saw, how to find the solution, go over to the website, get the solution, install it. All the documentation is there. How to configure your Melissa APIs. Remember, you have 3 possibilities: global, personator, and express entry. How do you map your objects and fields? I've shown some of that. So you have the ability to use the control to indicate which fields you want to map your data to. And finally, what the experience looks like on the forms as well as on workflows.
Perfect.
And yeah, that's it.
Outstanding. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion. I did see a few questions coming in during the presentation. So the first one I'd like to ask you, Salim, is if you could kind of go over some of the differences between the on-premise version and the cloud platforms.
Yeah, it's a good question. I just want to clarify. So you're probably referring to Dynamics version in the cloud and on-premise. From our perspective, it doesn't really make a difference in the sense that our solution is compatible with both. However, we have usually a little bit of a longer lead time for the updates to come in on the on-premises version. But the products works the same. The user experience is slightly different from one place versus the other.
Perfect. And then both of those, I remember seeing, are available for download on the SharpXRM website, correct?
Yes, they are.
Outstanding. The second question we have is to why the Latin long fields are not allowed to be edited by the end user.
Wow, lots of good questions today. So it's actually because we don't want to, because the data is calculated automatically and relatively sensitive, because you send people to location, some maps use it to pin it on themselves, etc. We don't want users to make edits, at least using our screens. However, once the information is saved back to your Dynamics fields, you can expose those fields and have people make changes to them. So we prevent it in that screen that you just saw, but people could actually unlock the fields on the records themselves if they want to make changes.
Awesome. The next question is in regards to how the Dynamics Clean Suite, is licensed. And if I remember correctly, there is a license that is from SharpXRM to license the plugin itself, and then there would be licenses from Melissa Data in regards to which services are active in the plugin. Is that correct?
That's correct. So on the SharpXRM, so you pay a license per user per month or per year, depending, to have access to the product on your system, and then you would also have to pay for your Melissa APIs in the typical way that you're probably doing it already.
Awesome. And then the next question that I see is about how does updating the plugin work, and then also updating the kind of data underlying it ourselves. So for updating the plugin, that would be if there's any updates from your end, correct? They would get like email notifications or something like that?
That is correct. And this is because we're not yet on the Microsoft App Source. So right now, when there's an update that happens, we send out an email for people to know. And so they can go download the latest version on the site, and then they can install over what they currently use. So that's the process today. And it's a relatively simple update too.
Perfect. And then finally, looks like we have one last question coming in. It's in regards to validating the addresses in batch, so like multiple records kind of at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And that is another good one. So the last piece that I showed there with the workflow, where you were able to do address verification without having any human interaction, I did it from an account, but you could actually have that run automatically as you create an account, as you update an address. So that's how you would do batch, right? You would import records and you would have the workflow running, for example, on creation of an account or on the update of a specific field so that the data gets updated.
Awesome. So with that, I believe those are the last couple questions that I see in chat. So if there are any further questions, feel free to reach out to Salim or myself. We'll be able to answer them privately. With that, I'd like to thank you, and thank you, Salim, for joining us today to show us a demonstration of the plugin.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.